You think giving up is loud. You imagine it as a final argument, a slammed door, a list of every disappointment, every broken promise. Every night you lay awake wondering why your love wasn't enough to make someone show up. But the first stage isn't loud at all. It's quiet, almost gentle. And that's why it hits like a shock. It's the moment your energy stops reaching for them automatically. It's the moment your heart, exhausted from carrying the connection, whispers something simple and terrifying. I can't keep bleeding just to keep this alive. They feel that shift before they understand it. Not as, I'm losing them, but as a strange discomfort, like the room is the same and yet the air has changed. For so long, your love was predictable. Your care was reliable. Even when you were upset, you were engaged, you were present, you were still trying. Your anger still meant you cared. Your tears still meant you hoped. And for someone who avoids emotional exposure, your predictability isn't just comfort. It's safety, because it means they can pull back and trust you will come closer. So when you stop reacting the way you used to, their nervous system notices. You don't double text. You don't chase the silence. You don't ask the follow-up question that used to keep the conversation alive. You might still be kind, you might still reply, but you're not performing anymore. You're not rushing to prove you're easy to love. You're not shrinking your needs so they don't feel pressured. You stop handing out the benefit of the doubt on credit, and that tiny change becomes the first tremor that shakes their comfort. This stage is confusing for them because it doesn't look like hatred. It looks like calm. You answer without trying to keep the conversation going. You don't punish them, but you also don't rescue them. You don't threaten, you don't plead, you simply stop bending. And that calm carries a message they were never prepared to hear, because it isn't designed to get a reaction. It's designed to protect you. It says, your silence doesn't control me anymore. It says, my life does not pause because you can't be present. That's why, in this first stage, they start scanning you for signs. They become aware of your tone, your timing, your warmth, the little things they used to take for granted. They look for the old version of you, the one who had one more chance, one more conversation, one more emotional rescue mission. They look for the person who would twist themselves into knots, just to keep the connection from breaking. And when they can't find that person, they don't always feel regret first. They feel uncertainty, because the old rules are gone. And uncertainty is the one feeling they hate sitting with. And I need you to hear this, because if you're the one who has finally given up, you might be telling yourself a story that breaks you. You might think, they don't notice, they don't care, they're fine. But avoidant calm is often delay. In this first stage, they feel it in small moments, not big speeches. They open their phone and there's no message from you. They send something casual and your reply doesn't carry the same softness. They realize they can't predict you anymore. And somewhere deep inside them, something starts to whisper too. Wait, what if they're actually done? Because your reactions used to confirm something for them, that the connection was still available on their terms. When you were hurting, you were still attached. When you were pleading, you were still hopeful. When you were explaining, you were still trying to rescue the relationship by yourself. You were doing emotional labor that made their avoidance feel harmless, and you were paying the price while calling it love. So when you stop doing that, it's not revenge. It's reality. It's you refusing to hold the entire relationship up alone, like love is a job you have to work overtime to keep. This is why your peace can disturb them more than your anger ever did. Anger still meant you believed there was something worth fighting for. Anger still meant you were invested in being understood. Peace, real peace, is what happens when you stop negotiating your worth. It's protective, not cold. It's the kind of peace that says, I won't abandon myself to keep someone comfortable. And yes, for you, this stage can feel like grief. Not the grief of being rejected, but the grief of realizing how much you carried, how much you waited, how much you softened yourself so they wouldn't have to feel too much. You're not quieter because you stopped loving. You're quieter because you stopped abandoning yourself. You stopped chasing because chasing doesn't create closeness. It creates exhaustion. You stopped explaining because your feelings don't need a courtroom to be valid. You stopped reaching because reaching alone is not intimacy. It's loneliness with a person attached to it. And that's what they sense in this first stage, even if they can't articulate it yet, that you're no longer available to be pulled into the old cycle. And for the first time, losing you doesn't feel like a theory. It feels like something that could actually happen. In the second stage, something inside them starts to scramble for the old balance, because the first stage took away their comfort, and now they want it back. They still may not call it fear, They may not even admit to themselves that they're scared, but their behavior begins to reveal it. When control starts slipping, they don't suddenly become consistent. They become strategic without meaning to, like a person reaching for a light switch in a dark room, hoping the familiar glow will return. They don't know how to ask for closeness directly, so they look for ways to pull you back without having to stand fully in the vulnerability of, "I miss you, I'm sorry, I know I hurt you, and I want to do better." This is where the mixed signals show up, and I want you to understand how painful this can be for you, because it's the stage that can make a strong person doubt themselves again. They might send a message that is just warm enough to reopen the door, but not warm enough to offer safety. They might like something you posted, watch your stories, reply with a small joke, a soft compliment, thinking of you. But how have you been? And it can feel like rain in a desert, because you've been starving for effort. But the effort is measured. The effort is cautious. It's like they're testing the temperature of the water with a toe, instead of stepping in and saying, "I'm here fully, and I'm not leaving when it gets real." And the reason they do this is simple, even if it's heartbreaking. They want to know if they still have access to you. Access to your attention, access to your softness, access to the version of you that forgives quickly, the version that explains away their distance, the version that will do the emotional work for both of you just to avoid losing them. They want to see if you'll respond the way you used to, because if you do, their nervous system calms down. They get the comfort of connection without the cost of accountability. They get to feel wanted without having to risk rejection. They get to pull you close enough to feel safe, but not close enough that they have to be seen. This is why this stage feels confusing, because it can look like progress from far away, but it often feels like wet blush up close. One day they're warm, the next day they're quiet. One day they ask about your life, the next day they disappear. One day they flirt, the next day they go cold. And in the middle of all of that, you're left trying to interpret the smallest details like their clues, reading tone, timing, punctuation, and silence, trying to figure out what you mean to them, when the truth is, they're trying to figure out what they still control. Because control for an avoidant is not always about power, it's about safety. It's about keeping their emotions at a distance where they can manage them. It's about not feeling exposed. It's about keeping the relationship in a shape that doesn't demand too much vulnerability. And when you stop chasing, you remove a major piece of their safety system. You remove the guarantee that the connection will be there whenever they decide to come back. You remove the certainty that they can pull away and still return to the same version of you waiting patiently. So they start doing what they've always done when closeness feels risky. They try to create a connection that doesn't require them to fully show up. They might suddenly bring up a memory, something sweet, something nostalgic, something that reminds you of your best moments, because nostalgia is a shortcut to closeness without accountability. They might apologize in a vague way, not naming what they did, not taking ownership, but just enough to see if you soften, just enough to see if you say, "It's okay." They might use humor, because humor can bypass real conversation. They might act like everything is normal, because normal is easier than honest. And if you respond, if you give them warmth, if you give them the emotional reassurance they miss, they get their control back. Not because you're weak, but because you're human, and you still care. This is also the stage where they might do the smallest version of effort, and watch how you react to it, because if a small effort gets a big response, they learn they don't have to do more. A 2-word message gets a paragraph from you. A late night hey gets your heart racing again. A miss you, with no plan, no change, no consistency, suddenly makes you feel like hope is alive again. And you start bargaining with yourself, telling yourself that maybe this is the beginning, maybe they're changing, maybe they finally realized what they lost. But what's really happening is, they're checking whether the old dynamic still works. And this is where you have to be so careful, because the second stage is built to pull you back into emotional labor. It's built to make you prove you're still there, to make you chase again, to make you earn what you should never have to earn: basic effort, basic respect, basic consistency. It can make you feel guilty for holding a boundary. It can make you feel like you're being cold, like you're being unfair, like you're punishing them, when in reality you're doing something healthy. You're refusing to be pulled into a cycle that keeps breaking you. If you want to know what real change looks like, it doesn't look like a breadcrumb. It doesn't look like a test. It doesn't look like attention without clarity. Real change looks like directness. It looks like accountability. It looks like them risking discomfort to be honest, even if it's messy. It looks like I know I've been inconsistent, and I know it hurt you, and I want to show you I'm serious, not just talk about it. Because words are easy in this stage. Words are safe. Words can be sent and then withdrawn from. Consistency is what costs them something. Consistency is what requires them to regulate their fear instead of letting it drive the relationship. And if you are the one standing in this stage, feeling your heart pull in two directions, one direction toward the love you still feel, the other direction toward the self-respect you're learning to protect, I want you to remember this: your boundary is not cruelty. Your boundary is the first time you chose yourself without apologizing. If they truly want you, they will not punish you for needing safety. They will not disappear because you asked for clarity. They will not call you difficult because you stopped accepting less. They will step forward, not just reach out. They will show up, not just check in. In the fourth stage, everything becomes painfully clear, because this is the moment where feelings are no longer the main issue. They can miss you. They can think about you. They can even feel a wave of regret so strong it makes their chest tighten. But none of that is the real decision. The real decision is whether they will step into the discomfort of becoming someone who can love you properly, or whether they will choose the familiar comfort of disappearing again, because disappearing has always protected them from feeling exposed. This stage begins the moment they finally accept one hard truth: the old version of you is not coming back. Not the version that waited without limits. Not the version that explained your pain like you were presenting evidence in a court. Not the version that forgave quickly because you were terrified of losing them. They realize that if they want you now, they don't just want your attention. They have to earn your trust, and trust is not rebuilt by words. Trust is rebuilt by consistent behavior over time. This is where their ego fights for survival, because ego wants the quick win. Ego wants to be forgiven without having to feel the shame of what they did. Ego wants you to soften so they don't have to face the consequences of their avoidance. So the first thing that often shows up in this stage is a moment of clarity mixed with fear. They want to reach out, but they want to reach out in a way that keeps them safe. They want to say, "I miss you," without saying, "I'm sorry." They want to reconnect without being accountable. They want to hear your warmth without risking your anger. And this is where you can feel the difference between someone who is truly choosing growth and someone who is only choosing comfort. Because the person choosing comfort will reach for you like a familiar blanket. They will want you to soothe them. They will want you to reassure them. They will want you to make it easy for them to return. And the moment they sense it will take work, they will start to pull away again. But the person choosing growth moves differently. Growth shows up with humility. Growth shows up with patience. Growth shows up with the ability to tolerate discomfort without blaming you for it. They don't demand instant forgiveness, because they understand the damage took time. They don't guilt you for having boundaries, because they finally see that your boundaries are the evidence of how much you had to survive emotionally. They don't make you feel like you're difficult for needing reassurance, because they realize you were never difficult. You were just lonely inside a relationship that kept you guessing. This stage is a choice point, because it forces them to confront the real reason avoidants lose good love. It's not because they don't feel anything. It's not because they're heartless. It's because when love asks them to be seen, they confuse being seen with being unsafe. When love asks them to be consistent, they confuse consistency with losing freedom. When love asks them to communicate, they confuse communication with conflict. So they build a life where they can miss people without fully showing up for them, and they call that independence. But deep down it is fear wearing a confident mask. And now, with you, the mask is cracking, because losing you is not just losing a person, it is losing the one place where they could retreat and still feel loved. You were the bridge. You were the soft landing. You were the one who kept trying even when you were tired. And when that bridge is gone, they feel the full weight of their own pattern. They see that the thing they call space is sometimes just avoidance, and the thing they call not needing anyone is sometimes just self-protection that costs them everything they actually want. So in this stage, they will either lean into the hard work, or they will rewrite the story. Leaning into the work means they stop playing games. They stop sending breadcrumbs. They stop acting confused when they know exactly what they did. They stop expecting you to meet them halfway when you've been walking the whole distance for months. They show up with clarity, not drama. They show up with actions, not speeches. They show up with consistency that you can feel in your nervous system, because your nervous system is what has been paying for their inconsistency. You have been living in a constant state of alert, reading tone, waiting for replies, wondering if today is a warm day or a cold day, and the right person will not ask you to live like that again. Rewriting the story looks different. Rewriting the story is when they turn your boundary into an insult, because it's easier than admitting you were right to draw it. Rewriting the story is when they say you were too much, too emotional, too needy, too demanding, when the truth is you were simply asking for love that didn't make you beg. Rewriting the story is when they act like your peace is arrogance, because your peace makes them face their own chaos. Rewriting the story is when they walk away again and tell themselves, it wouldn't have worked anyway. Because if they convince themselves you were the problem, they never have to face the grief of what they failed to do. And if you are the one standing on the other side of this stage, I need you to remember something that will protect your heart. Their choice point is not yours to manage. It is not your job to coax them into growth. It is not your job to become smaller so they feel safe. It is not your job to accept half love so they don't feel pressured. The moment you start doing that, you are not building a relationship, you are building a shelter for their fear, and you will be the one left in the cold again. Your power in this stage is quiet and strong. Your power is the ability to watch what they do, not what they say. Your power is the ability to let consistency impress you more than intensity. Your power is the ability to require effort without apologizing for it. Because if they truly love you, they will not ask you to lose yourself to keep them. They will meet you with steadiness, with accountability, with a presence that feels like relief, not confusion, not anxiety, not constant guessing. And if they don't choose growth, if they retreat, if they disappear, if they make you feel guilty for wanting safety, then the fourth stage becomes your own choice point too. The moment you finally choose the love that chooses you back, the moment you stop confusing longing with commitment, the moment you stop hoping someone will become safe while you keep absorbing the pain. In the third stage, the noise dies down, and that is what makes it feel so heavy, because when the little tests stop working, when the casual messages don't pull you back, when the familiar tricks don't reawaken the old version of you, something inside them begins to collapse quietly. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that makes them suddenly become romantic and consistent, but in a private, internal way that most people never get to witness. This is the stage where the avoidance stops feeling like strength and starts feeling like a cage, because the one thing they relied on, distance, no longer gives them relief. It starts in small moments. A night when the distractions don't distract. A car ride when the music doesn't fill the silence the way it used to. A random memory that hits them in the chest, not because they want to suffer, but because the mind does something cruel when it knows you've lost something. It replays what mattered. Your laugh, your softness, the way you showed up, the way you tried to understand them, the way you made room for their moods, their fear, their shutdowns. And what used to feel normal to them, your emotional labor, now feels like something they may never have again. This stage is painful for them because they can no longer pretend that your love is guaranteed. Your absence stops being an idea and becomes a real experience. It becomes weekends that feel empty in a way they can't explain, because they're not used to missing someone with their whole body. They're used to missing someone in a controlled way, from a distance on their terms. But now, missing you doesn't come with the comfort of knowing they can send one message and get the old you back. Now, the silence has consequences, and consequences force reflection, and reflection is the place they've spent their whole life trying to avoid. And that's why this is an internal collapse, because it's not only about you, it's about what you represented. You represented safety without demands. You represented warmth even when they were cold. You represented love that stayed, even when they didn't know how to. And when you finally stop offering that, it exposes something they've been running from, the fear that they don't actually know how to keep the good things in their life. The fear that closeness requires something they haven't learned, emotional responsibility, emotional presence, emotional courage. This is where shame starts to whisper, not the kind of shame that makes someone say, "I'm terrible," and then do better, but the kind of shame that makes someone feel raw, exposed, and defensive. They replay moments where you asked for something simple and they made it complicated. Moments where you said you didn't feel chosen and they told you were overthinking. Moments where you needed reassurance and they offered logic instead of comfort. Moments where you tried to talk about the relationship and they shut down, disappeared, changed the subject, or made you feel like you were asking for too much. And in this stage, they begin to see those moments with new eyes, because now they are the ones sitting with the emptiness you used to sit with. It's also the stage where grief starts to show up, and grief is a strange thing for someone who avoids emotions, because grief has no off switch. Grief doesn't respond to distraction forever. It waits patiently. It shows up at inconvenient times. It shows up when they least expect it, when they see a place you used to go, when they smell a scent that reminds them of you, when they hear a phrase you used to say. And because they haven't learned how to hold big feelings, they can swing between missing you deeply and resenting the feeling of missing you, because needing you makes them feel powerless. This is where the inner war becomes intense. One part of them wants to reach out and say, "I miss you. I made a mistake. I didn't know how to show up." Another part of them imagines reaching out and being rejected, and that possibility feels unbearable, because rejection isn't just rejection to them. It's proof that vulnerability is dangerous. So they stay silent, not because they don't care, but because caring makes them feel exposed, and exposure feels like danger. They sit in the middle, wanting connection, fearing connection, missing you, resisting the feeling of missing you, and that tension becomes the collapse. And here's what makes this stage so heartbreaking for you. The person who loved them, you might never get to see it. You might never get the apology that matches what you went through. You might never get the message that finally says the right words. You might never get the validation that proves you weren't crazy for wanting more. Because the avoidant often collapses internally in silence, and if they don't have the tools to turn that collapse into growth, they will turn it into retreat, because retreat is familiar. But if you're watching from the outside, you might see glimpses. You might see them checking your social media more than they used to. You might see them circling around you without stepping forward. You might see them show up in small, indirect ways, because directness feels like stepping onto thin ice. They might ask mutual friends about you. They might bring you up casually. They might act unbothered in public, but privately they feel unsettled, because the person they assumed would always be there is no longer there in the same way. And if you are the one who has been hurt, this stage can tempt you to go back, because you can feel their energy change, and you can sense something is happening inside them. And your heart wants to believe that this is the moment it all turns around. But you need to remember, internal collapse is not the same as transformation. Pain is not the same as growth. Missing you is not the same as choosing you. Regret is not the same as repair. The question is never, do they feel something? The question is, will they do something different? Because the truth is, you don't need someone to suffer to love you properly. You need someone to show up. You need someone who can sit in discomfort and still stay. You need someone who can face their fear without making you pay for it. And if this stage becomes real growth, it will show itself in actions that are consistent, humble, and accountable, not in vague messages, not in emotional confusion, not in moments of longing followed by disappearance. Your heart deserves more than evidence that they miss you. Your heart deserves proof that they can meet you.